7.0 brought with it a lot of cool and interesting changes to the game of Dota that I'm sure we all feel mostly positive about. That said, something I wish they had looked more at before rolling out the patch was chip damage, illusion-based team compositions, specifically Shadow Demon and Luna. Along with indirectly nerfing so many other heroes undeservedly, I still seem to run into this crap in nearly 75% of my games. One day, I told myself that I was done hemorrhaging MMR from such a cheesy strat, so I decided to spam this new secret OP hero that you've likely never heard of, whenever I even thought someone was picking one of those two heroes. And that hero is Broodmother. Yes, I understand that my most recent video covered a lot of concepts and strategies revolving around this hero, but I still see people telling me that she's weak in my pubs, telling me outright not to pick her because apparently it's bad, and DotaBuff even wrote an article saying that if you random her in a pub, you should re-pick her. The public opinion of her doesn't appear to be glamorous, but I'm here today to show you that Brood can be quite powerful in the right hands, and that you can beat Luna's Shadow Demon, all so long as you're not afraid of spiders. Cheesy jokes aside, let's get into picking considerations. If all you care about is counterpicking the coveted Luna SD combo, you should probably try and save your Brood pick until you see both of those heroes picked on the enemy team. You'd prefer to pick it last, as both Luna and Shadow Demon complement an offensive tri-lane quite well, and it'd really suck if you picked Brood immediately after seeing Luna SD and Visage, for instance, only to find out that they're picking a Darkseer to deal with you, whilst they tri-lane your safe lane and destroy your team. I firmly stand behind the statement that a good Brood never loses her lane, no matter what heroes and how many of them the enemy decides to throw at you, but you probably don't spam Brood like I do, and it's probably in your best interest to stick to the rule of thumb of trying to pick her as late into the picking stage as possible. In terms of gameplay, if Meepo is the hardest hero to play mechanically, and Winter Wyvern is the hardest hero to play in terms of decision making, where two of your four abilities could potentially do more harm than good, then Brood should be considered a solid middle ground of difficulty between the two. She's no Meepo, but she definitely takes some skill and some pre-game setup in terms of hotkeys, before you really get into the meat and potatoes of the hero. I personally have 5 hotkeys set up for my Brood. 1 for my main hero and my spiders, 2 for just my spiders, 3 for my main hero, 4 for my spiderlings, the ones with 450 HP, and 5 for my spiderites, which are the weaker version of the 2 that spawn from the spiderlings. Let me know in the comment section below how many hotkeys you have set up for your Brood. And as for decision making, Brood needs to constantly be thinking into the future in terms of her item and skill build progression, also a general game plan. Of course, to a degree most heroes have this degree of complexity to them as well, but Brood's flexibility and ability to adapt as a hero in terms of both how she's built and how she's played puts her in a league of her own, and maximizing this particular aspect of her is something I see done so rarely that it's a crime. If we're sticking to the theme of specifically wanting to counterpick Luna and Shadow Demon in your games, you should probably start with items that look identical to the ones that I started with this game. Soul Ring Recipe, Sentries, and Tangos. When you spawn into your games, take careful consideration for the clock. You want to get into the off lane and place 2 webs as quickly as possible whilst still being able to make it back in time for a decent creep block. You also want to stay on patrol whilst invisible in your webs and see if their supports are trying to rotate bot lane on your allies, or the respective top lane if, say, hypothetically, you're on the Dire. If this is the case, you may be able to snag their top or bottom bounty rune from whoever is solo up here or there. In any event, you should have no problem buying your items and getting 2 webs down before the start of the game. If I had to summarize the biggest noob trap I've seen most players fall into whilst playing Brood, it's not understanding when their timing is to be aggressive in the lane. People overestimate just how strong she appears to be at her earliest and weakest levels. Understand that until level 3, you're not very good for very much, and even when you're level 3, all you're really trying to do is amass your first wave of spiderites. Try to spam your level 1 nuke at early ranks to get last hits. Honestly, as early as when I even get the ability, which is level 2, is when I start spamming it, unless I'm against a really rough tri-lane that I can't even contest last hits for. You want to get that early ball of spiderites going from the first spider that your nuke will produce, to contest as many denies that are possible. Don't concern yourself with feeding spiders early on. Remember that if they're trying to kill spiderites at really early levels, they're probably overcommitting resources and missing last hits as a result. Neither Luna nor Shadow Demon have a really efficient way of killing massive balls of spiders, unless the Shadow Demon devotes many uses of Shadow Poison, which is really easy to dodge and very mana intensive for him. Your first early rush is going to be Medallion, and by the time you get it, you should have enough spiders to begin really hammering on the aggression. Medallion turns Brood's spiders into eight-legged freaks like from the 2002 movie, and I get the item in literally every single game that I play Brood now. It transitions insanely well into Solar Crest, which is a very underrated item that allows Brood to fulfill multiple roles on whatever team comp she may end up being on. Against Luna, it's pretty great up until she gets BKB for destroying her ability to right-click and soak damage with Manta Butterfly. After she gets BKB, it's still an amazing item because she won't usually rush MKB, and you can still use it to buff your team. As for a skill build, you should be putting points into spawn spiders whenever you feel like you can start being aggressive in your lane. The death that I just sustained probably wouldn't have happened had I put another point into spawn spiders instead of spin webs, and I probably would have gotten a double kill. It's never a static build order, but usually putting 2 points into spin webs as fast as possible is the safest bet, and from there, allocating points into whichever ability gets you more kills is usually the correct option. Remember that leveling spawn spiders is an investment. You usually won't see the immediate payoffs of the ability unless you're using it as a straight nuke. Otherwise, you need to get some uses off of it for it to see some value. This is because the spawning spiders aspect of the ability is what yields the most lane dominance, rather than spamming the nuke on your enemies every time it's off cooldown. Obviously use it to obtain and secure kills, but if not for that sole purpose, I make it a priority to garner an army as early as possible and maintain it throughout the laning phase, as that's often what'll give you more power in the long run. Again, if you're not really concerned with learning Brood, and you just want to abuse her for easy MMR against Luna's Shadow Demon pickers, then probably just being mindful of the fact that Brood has alternate skill variations will suffice. However, I highly encourage that if you're interested in learning more about the hero in depth, you check out my 2-hour-long Brood guide that I've broken into 2 parts that I've posted here on YouTube. Links in the description. As for item progression beyond Medallion, you usually want to get brown boots relatively quickly, and then not upgrade them until you get a Radiance. Yes, we're going Radiance on Broodmother. The strengths of going Radiance on Brood are numerous, so I'll try to keep my explanation brief. 1. Brood can get Radiance obscenely quicker than most heroes in the game, due to her innate survivability and farming mechanisms, and general ability to snowball a lead. I've sometimes even gotten it around 13 minutes, which rivals the timings of most mid-alchemists. 2. Radiance plus Incapacitating Bite plus Solar Crest Mischance gives one hero in a team fight effectively a 0% chance to hit. This is because even though evasion stacks multiplicatively, most people don't know that mischance, or applying mischance on a target, stacks additively. You can effectively make it impossible for one person to auto-attack in team fights indefinitely, as long as you can right-click them and they don't have a BKB or an MKB. And 3. Brood Radiance is a lot like Lone Druid Radiance. It lets you push and end games at around 20 minutes after you've taken all of the enemy's tier 2 towers, then their shrines, then secured Aegis for your team, and then you go high ground. I like to go Solar Crest into Power Treads into BKB at this point, but again, understanding that Brood's build needs to be flexible and adapt to whatever your team needs / the enemy's team has is crucial to playing a good Brood. If you don't need the strength and attack speed that treads provide nearly as much as you need a quicker item or phase boots, then get that quicker item or phase boots. If your team has enough damage and you can play a more backline style Brood, buffing your team with Solar Crest and burning their team with Radiance, consider getting a pipe or a mechanism to bolster your team even more so. Be flexible with your items and Brood's real strength as a hero will shine. Radiance is particularly good against Luna's Shadow Demon because illusions can't gain the benefits of the BKB's active, so until Luna gets an MKB, you'll always be burning them and applying a mischance, as well as pointing them out that they're illusions to your team. An often underrated aspect of what makes Brood so strong against certain tri-lanes that can't ever leave their safe lane carry alone for fear of them dying is just that very thing. Notice that if the Shadow Demon or Shadow Shaman ever left my lane for more than a few seconds, I was ready to pounce on that Luna and punish them for rotating or attempting to rotate on my team. This forces their team to play a 3v1 throughout most of the game versus a hero they can't even kill, while my team gets to play 4v2 against heroes they can dive indefinitely. Another underrated aspect of Brood that not very many people mention is how well she assists ganks. If your supports ever decide to roam on the enemy safe laner, you should have no problem getting a kill, or even 2, assuming they're packing any amount of CC whatsoever. Be cautious with this though. If you don't have spiders, your hero can be fairly ineffective at getting kills, and you don't want to waste too much time while your supports are sitting around doing effectively nothing on the map outside of leeching your experience. After you've inevitably won the laning phase and taken their tier 1 tower, You might feel obligated to committing one of the two deadly sins Brood players often make, which are split pushing all game or fighting before you have Radiance. Understand that carefully split pushing the enemy safe laners tier 2 while your team fights 4v5s is often the better play, because they should be winning those fights anyways given how much of a massive lead you bought them, and your hero's fairly ineffective without Radiance in the mid game. One of the things I like the most about the Luna versus Broodmother matchup in particular is just how ineffective most of Luna's kit is against Broodmother. For starters, her ulti often hits Spiderlings and Spiderites, making your summons really nice beef tanks for both you and your team, which also holds true for her Glaives of Wisdom, which do, as I mentioned, bounce on your spiders as well. Her passive helps her deal more physical damage, which you only end up mitigating with your passive, Radiance and Solar Crest. And finally, her Q is, whilst a pretty solid nuke, hard for her to use against you when she's running away from your spiders dying in the early game, and she has no vision of you. Combine this with the fact that she's a range hero who can't really buy a poor man's, and her high move speed is relatively ineffective against a hero with max movement speed, and the only thing she really has going for her is her decent starting armor. Shadow Demon isn't much safer against Brood either. Banish doesn't really stop your spiders from destroying him. You can easily dodge Shadow Poison. He has low base armor and movement speed, making him even more of prey versus Brood than Luna. Soulcatcher often catches on spiders and not your main hero, and his ultimate, whilst it is a pretty good and crippling slow against Brood, doesn't really stop the spiders at all, and it doesn't even purge your ultimate like it used to. Anyway, I hope this video was informative and demonstrated a new way of playing a hero you probably forgot about against a combination of heroes commonly deemed overpowered in the current metagame. Again, if you're curious to learn anything more about this hero, I highly encourage you to check the guide out that I made for her a few weeks ago, or check my stream, as I spam this hero a fair amount and can probably offer some demonstrative insight as to how to play versus some of the commonly conceived counters to Broodmother, such as Axe, Legion Commander, Timbersaw, Tidehunter, Darkseer, Winter Wyvern, Earthshaker, and the such like. I don't know, something like 40% of the hero pool supposedly counters her. Join me next week where I plan on making a similar guide for our favorite Earth memer, talking about how you can still smash games with him in 7.01, why it's okay to sometimes magnetize creep waves for farm, why you should skip your talents until level 15, and much more.